It's Friday on Melrose Mountain at higher ground, and the temperature is about 75 degrees. A beautiful sunny day, and they say we're going to warm up into the mid 80s by tomorrow afternoon. But right now it's just extremely pleasant, and we're really enjoying the weather. Have you ever been sleepy? Have you ever been with other people, maybe even in a church service, where you just couldn't keep your eyes open? You were just so sleepy, and you just were fighting it. You'd find your head starting to droop and then jerk it back up again. Well, I've seen lots of folks in my services, hopefully not because of my preaching, but hopefully because of the reasons they said, either that they'd had not a good night's sleep the night before, or they were on some kind of medicine that was making them sleepy. But I've seen lots of people in services fighting sleep. And that's what I was reminded of as I looked at Mark 14, verses 32 through 42. You remember that Jesus and his disciples have just celebrated the Passover in the upper room. They've gone out into the garden, and Jesus takes most of the disciples and says, stay put here. Takes three of the disciples with him, Peter, James, and John, and walk a little bit further into the garden. And then he says to them, now watch and pray. Those were their instructions. But remember, it's been a long day. They've been in Bethany. They've walked down to Jerusalem. They've been back into the garden, and they're tired. And it's probably fairly late in the evening, even maybe early morning. And they're sleepy. And so as Jesus goes off to pray, it says that he was burdened. He was troubled. He was grieved. Can you imagine knowing exactly when you're going to die and how you're going to die and how painful it's going to be? Because remember, even though he was all God, he was also all man. And he felt those nails go into his hands. He felt that whip on his back, and he knew what he was facing. And so he prayed a prayer that if this cup could pass from him, if there was any other way for the redemption of mankind, that he wished that God would exercise that other option. But he always said, nevertheless, thy will be done. Now he comes back the first time and he finds them sleeping. And he says, wake up, I asked you to watch and pray. He comes back a second time, and the same thing happens. And he makes a very, very interesting statement. He says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Now that's something to remember, but not something to use as an excuse. When we're filled with the Spirit, and when we're challenged by God to do something, we really need to try to stay committed to that in every way that we can, and not use the excuse that the flesh is weak. On the other hand, when we do stumble, or when somebody else stumbles, we need to remember that the flesh is weak. And even though the spirit may be willing, it's really easy to give in to the flesh. Next time you're falling asleep watching a television program, hopefully not in a church service, but maybe in a church service, I want you to remember that that's exactly what Jesus said to his disciples. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. Try to stay in the spirit. Try not to give in to the flesh. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a wonderful day.